Now they're moving. Hey guys, welcome to my new channel. My name is Lissa and I wanted to start a channel all about my love of books and tea and nature as well. So I was actually an English major. I graduated last year down in California, and I have recently moved to the Pacific Northwest, where it is beyond beautiful out here, and there is so much to share that I felt like I couldn't not include it. So basically my plan for this channel will be to do book reviews. I'll talk about writing too, because I love to write. Do all kinds of book hauls, book suggestions for you. Pretty much anything in the literary world that you can think of. There's a lot out there already, but I'm going to try to bring something different to you. Currently, we're by a beautiful river, as you can see, out in the woods. It's pretty impossible to find anywhere that is not gorgeous out here, but I wanted to showcase it. So I've got my little setup here. We've got tea, because I always have my tea. Right now it's summertime, so we're gonna have iced tea for the time being. We'll eventually switch to cozy, warm, hot tea. I just thought it'd be cute, make it cozy, make it fun. And so today I wanted to talk about something that's a little different in terms of the English major world. I feel like there's a common misconception that English majors only read, Beowulf, Shakespeare, Jane Austen, The Picture of Dorian Gray, all those books, which I did. I did read a lot of those books, but I also read a ton of books that I had never even heard of before getting into the English major world. And so I thought it would be cool if we could talk about 10 of my favorite unconventional books that I studied as an undergrad as an English major. So let's jump into it. So I brought along a little book bag with all 10 of my books in here, and this came from Coffee and a Classic, which is a book subscription gifted to me by my best friend, and this is a little quote from Jane Austen. So let's jump into the first one. The first book that I have that I brought with me is Atonement, and Atonement is by Ian McEwan. This one I wanted to do first because it's probably the most classic of all the books that I brought. You may already know very well about this one. It's a common book read in more recent literature times, and then also it's a very famous movie. So thought I'd bring it anyways though, because it was a great newer literature classic. So you can see all of my note tabs in there. I did study this quite heavily. We'll do some close-ups so that you can really see. I even have notes in here and everything, so you'll be able to see a little bit of that. But basically Atonement is centered in London, England, in the 1930s, and it follows Briony, I've heard different pronunciations, correct me if you know which one it's supposed to be. And she is a 13-year-old girl in the first part of the book, and she decides to tell a terrible lie that follows her for the rest of her life. The whole book is about her need for atonement and how she can correct that mistake that she made. Take a little breather, have a little tea. Delicious. Book number 2 on my list is Reckless, and this is actually a play by Craig Lewis, and it is from 1989. And this one, again, notes galore, you'll see there, but it's a play and it's a tragedy, but it is so hilarious that I could not include it because I loved it. I had never heard of it, and this was probably my favorite thing I read in my tragedy class that I took. And this one is very, very short. You can see, you can read it in probably an hour or two, but it follows this woman named Rachel, who is obnoxiously optimistic, and she just gets into predicament after predicament. The very first one is what sets off the whole story, and basically her husband alludes to her that he hired a hitman to murder her, most likely because she annoyed him. And she escapes out the window on Christmas Eve with his warning. So it follows from there, and it goes on, and she gets herself into a million other kinds of predicaments. Look at that! They're having some fun. See, this is why this area is so great. There's so much nature stuff to do. We'll have some more floating by in a minute. So number 2, yeah, Reckless. Awesome play. I absolutely loved reading that one. It was really funny and sad at the same time. It takes so many twists and turns that you do not ever expect coming, so I had to include that one. Book number 3 that I brought with me is Pedro Páramo. Please excuse my lack of accent. I have none, and I cannot pronounce anything in Spanish whatsoever. But it is by Juan Rulfo. It was written in Mexico in 1955 and translated for this edition that I have here. So this one I read in a world literature class, and so this was actually the first book that we read, and I did not think much of it when we started. I was like, this sounds really weird, but so the book follows Juan Preciado and his journey to find his father, Pedro Páramo, in a little town called Comala. And Comala is, it's up to your interpretation what Comala is, but it is full of its own secrets. I'll just leave it at that. But it's very surrealist. It almost has like a fantasy, not sci-fi, but a fantasy kind of edge to it. Where most of it feels like a dream. Awesome choice to pick up and give it a shot. All right, the 4th book that I have on my list is Bird by Bird, and this is by Anne Lamott. This is a little different, so this is not a novel or anything. This is actually a like health book for writing and life. I think it actually says, yeah, instructions on writing and life. So basically it's a series of essays and short stories and personal stories from Anne Lamott, just all about writing tips, pretty much just anything involved with being a reader, writer, and a little bit about life as well. But what's so special about this one is that it is completely hilarious. Like, I bust up the entire time I was reading this. Everyone is pretty short. I'll show you some close-ups on that. So it goes really quickly, but it tells you how to write characters, how to write plots, how to write a variety of different things. So it gives you some tips on that, but it keeps it funny and lighthearted. So a lot of writing books out there are painful to sit and read through. So this is a fun one to pick up if you need something that is inspiring but also makes you laugh. There's a great essay on shitty first drafts, is what it's called in here, about letting your writing be bad the first time you write. So awesome one to pick up. We studied the whole book actually and read a little bit of everything in it, so that was a great pick as well. All right, the 5th book that I brought with me is called The Visit, and it's by Frederick Durenmont, and this one settles in Gulen is the town. And this one is written in 1986, so it's a little bit older, but it's also a play, much like the earlier one I mentioned, and it follows the characters of Il and Claire. And now Claire was a woman that was shamed out of town when she was younger, only to become a millionaire that the town much needed later, because the town went bankrupt, everybody there was poor, and they had a massive flop in economy. So when Claire comes to visit the town, she offers to help them out and get the town back on their feet, pay off everybody's debts because she has the means to. The only exception that she makes is a terrible one for the fate of Mr. Ill. This was a great one. Since it's a tragedy and a comedy, it has you laughing the whole time. It's really funny, and some of the characters are super bizarre. So I love this one, but it definitely leaves you feeling a little bit icky at the end. Okay, the 6th book that I brought with me is called Love Medicine, and this is by Louise Erdrich. She's gotten a little more famous since I read it in school, but This is one of my favorite books that I actually read as I was in, I think, my second year of college. So I hadn't even declared myself as an English major yet, but I was in a composition course and read this book, and this was kind of what started me on the trek of becoming an English major. This one was written in 1984, but this version is from 2009. I'm looking at notes, don't mind me. So this one centers on two families that are Native American, and they are the Koshpas and the Lamartines. Again, excuse me if I'm mispronouncing them. You can let me know that I was saying it totally wrong. But it is so intensely interwoven and complex with the family, so it's a little hard to follow, but she did put the really nice little family tree up there. I'll give you a close-up on that too. But the family tree helps. I was definitely checking it constantly, but it follows these two families for, I think, like 60 years, through their multi-generational family. Every single chapter is by a different narrator, and you just get to see a lot of family drama, love, relationships, and everything comes back to love as the core between these families, individuals in the families, and everything. So, awesome book. So the seventh book that I have with me is a little bit of a unique one. You may know this one already. It's a bit more popular. It's called Mouse. I read the first and second ones in my class, but I did pick up the third one as well. And so the reason this is a little unique for an English major is that it's a graphic novel, and a lot of people don't think about graphic novels as being a part of studying English or literature or anything like that, but there's so much to unpack in these that it was actually one of my favorite to look at. I enjoyed, looking at every single little panel so much. I'll give you a close-up of it. But Mouse, basically, if you don't know what it's about, is based on the Holocaust, and it is by Art Spiegelman, and it follows his story of interviewing his father, actually, who was a Holocaust survivor. So it interweaves through a bunch of different timelines and stories based in that whole era, and it tells quite a story, and each little strip has so much to it that it was a long read, but it was a really good one. So if you have never read a comic book or graphic novel or anything like that, but you're really into reading, I totally suggest trying this out, because it was something that I never thought that we would study graphic novels in upper division English, but I did, and this was also during the world literature class that I took. So it was a lot of history based in this one, but definitely a cool and different way to look at literature. So highly recommend that one. So now we are on to number 8, and number 8 is The Beetle by Richard Marsh, and this was actually what I wrote my senior paper on, so I slaved over this book like no other. This one haunted me in many ways, because I spent hours poring over it, hours writing that essay, and when I turned it in, it was probably the greatest relief of my life. But as you can see, most of my notes are actually in the first part, because there's 3 different books to this one, and I wrote strictly on the first book. This one was actually written in 1897. It was a really popular horror story at its time, until I want to say Frankenstein came along and took its place. But this one is a British novel, and the first book in it follows a special kind of creature. I won't tell you what kind it is right now, but I mean, the name gives it away a little bit, but so much more complex than that. But it's basically a monster that is terrorizing and stalking a British politician. Paul Lessingham is his name, and it's stalking him to try and get vengeance for his part in defiling an Egyptian tomb that was sacred. So very creepy. The first book in it I enjoyed the most. They are all intertwined. You have to finish the whole thing to get the whole story all together. But the first part of it was definitely my favorite because it is so intensely creepy and it leaves you feeling really disturbed in a way that most monster books don't do to me. But it's very, very well written. I studied a lot about the history of like Egyptians versus the British and why, you know, they would be perceived as monsters at that time, and it was a really cool read. So definitely check it out. And if you were an English major and wrote on something for your senior paper, let me know what book you wrote on, because this was a really unique one and I had a really hard time finding any information out about it. So in terms of research, it was a tough one. So let me know below what you wrote about. Number 9 is actually a short story, but I have it in a collection of short stories from E.M. Forster, and that story is called The Machine Stops. The Machine Stops is a little bit more popular. You may have heard of it, you may not. But what really intrigued me about this one is how relevant it is today. So The Machine Stops was actually written in 1909, and it centers on a woman, Vashti, and her son, Kuno. And it's kind of a dystopian, so you get that dystopian edge to it, but it's very short, so it does end fairly quickly. I want to say it's only 100 pages or so, but if that. But basically technology takes over, the earth is no longer inhabitable and everybody has to move underground, and they are all preserved in life by this machine, and the machine is what keeps them living, it's what keeps everything intact, and one day the machine stops, basically. So that's all about kind of what happens when we rely on technology and then it falls apart, what happens. So I think that's really interesting because that's kind of where we might be headed. Who knows? What would happen if technology completely stopped? What would we do? Alright, so for my 10th and final favorite book that I read as an undergrad English major, I actually don't have a physical copy. I have it on my phone, so I'll give you a little close-up on that too, but it is called The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian. Now this is the only young adult novel that I'm including, which there's a ton of great young adult novels out there for sure. I know there's a lot of content on YouTube about them, but I wanted to include this one as a piece of literature because it was so interesting that it was included in the class that I took. But we were doing a segment on banned books. So this one is by Sherman Alexie, and it's actually his true story as a teen growing up. He was 14 years old in this book, and he actually lived nearby here in the Spokane Indian Reservation, and he decided to leave the reservation to go to a public high school. And when he did that, he was exiled, not exiled, but he was treated very, very different on the reservation. And when he went to the public school, he was treated very differently there. So he basically just never fit in either category of those places. And so the reason that this book was banned is because it dives in hard as far as violence, bullying, sexuality, there's alcohol, there's profanity, there's a lot of it. It's a very open book, if you will. So it's actually a partial graphic novel as well, which makes it pretty interesting because if you go through, there are a lot of drawings that I believe Sherman Alexie did himself that are within the story that help to tell the story a little bit, and they're all sketch kind of drawings, so it looks very much like a teenage boy drew them. But it's a great story. It is very vulgar, I will definitely say. Not for the faint of heart, but it's a great story. And one of my favorites from that class that I took, I can't remember what the name of that class was that I took, but it was all banned books and a lot of young adult literature. So I feel like people don't realize that, we even read young adult novels and we read dystopians and stuff like that. So it's not just all about the Shakespeare. As you can see, there's quite an array of different style books that I got to read, from plays and novels and graphic novels and translations from other languages. It's a lot, and there's a lot that you get to do. So definitely, if you're considering becoming an English major, don't think that all you're going to read is Shakespeare. And if you were or are an English major already, let me know what kind of unconventional books you read while you were in school, or while you are in school. What are you reading that's maybe a little different from the classics? Let me know below. Okay. All right. That bird is noisy. Oh my goodness. That's another blooper, isn't it? Okay. All right, that's all I've got for you guys today. So thank you so much for joining me. Go ahead and subscribe if you want more content from me, and let me know what you want to see. I've already been through the whole English major process. I am going onwards to get my master's. So if you have any questions for an English major that's already finished, let me know. Or if you have recommendations for videos that you want to see from me, let me know below. Go ahead and turn the notification bell on so that you know when I upload next. I'm going to try to do this pretty regularly. Next time you'll see me in a different location, so it won't be this. We might come back here from time to time too. Be sure to like the video. Tickle the like button, you know? Give it a little tickle. Say hello. All right. I think that's all I've got for you today, so I will see you all next time. Thanks for joining me. Bye.